from the commission, although there's phone number 508-776-7219. Who's that?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, all right, so I will grab script. The June 6, 2020 meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission is about to be convened. As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of coronavirus, all town buildings are closed to the public. Therefore, this meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Kelly Grant, and I will be moderating participation for this meeting. I will now turn it over to the chair of the meeting.
Thank you, Kelly. My name is Ed Hoops, and I'm the chairman of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission. I will begin by taking a roll call for quorum. David Bernstein.
Present.
Rick Bishop is not present. Tom Durkin.
Present.
Ed Hoops is present. Paul Huggins, sorry. Paul is not present. Let's see, Ellie Lawrence.
Present.
Patricia Mulhern.
Present.
All right, with a quorum present, I will ask that the moderator explain how remote participation works.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Applicants can raise their hand, can use the raise hand button or press *9 on their phone to identify themselves to the chair. The meeting host will unmute applicants when they are called upon to speak. During the portion of the hearing designated for public comment, the chair or moderator will ask who in the audience has public comment or questions. Members of the public can use the raise hand button or press *9 on their phone to identify themselves. The meeting host will unmute members of the public when they are called upon to speak. All participants are asked to identify themselves by first and last name and affiliation for the public record before speaking. All votes will be roll call votes. After the motion is made and there is a second, the chair will ask the moderator to take the roll call vote. The moderator will report the roll call vote. If it appears the meeting cannot or should not proceed, then the moderator will recommend that the chair request to continue the hearing to a later date and time and/or until public meetings can resume normally. I will now hand back the meeting to the chair.
All right, thank you, Kelly. That said, the regular state meeting will begin with agenda items number 1. Its initial review of proposed revised local stormwater regulations. And I know who is it, Rebecca, are you there? You ready to go?
I'm all set.
Okay, Rebecca, if you would just go ahead and state your name for the record and then go ahead and give us your presentation.
Okay. My name is Rebecca Balke. I work with Comprehensive Environmental Incorporated. We've been working with the town of Yarmouth on your stormwater management program for the last several years. So today I'm going to talk to you about one of the requirements under that stormwater program, which is to update some of your regulations for specific components. So I'll start running through. Just to give a little background, the MS4 stands for, it's basically Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It's regulated, the permit came out, it's part of, if you're familiar with the National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System, or NPDES as it's often referred to. That came as part of the EPA Clean Water Act in 1972. And basically it was kind of a waterfall effect where NPDES regulates discharges to surface waters. The MS4 permit was established to regulate municipal separate storm sewer systems. So basically your drainage system. And the whole purpose of the permit is to regulate discharges of pollutants through your drainage system. So your town currently has what is called an MS4 permit for your drainage system. The MS4 permit itself has 6 minimum measures that they require all permittees to meet. Just to give you a quick background, those 6 include some public education requirements. There's an illicit discharge detection and elimination piece, which I have highlighted here in black, or I used black text for that. The 3 items in black text are the regulatory pieces, or have some regulatory pieces associated with them. So that's one of them. Construction site stormwater controls and regulations is another piece. We'll get more into those in a few minutes. The post-construction site stormwater controls is another one, and then some good housekeeping requirements that would apply to different facilities throughout the town, as well as things like street sweeping and catch basin cleaning. So in terms of the regulatory requirements, the MS4 permit has some specific components. The first is illicit discharge detection and elimination. And under that, it requires communities to have a regulation in place that basically prohibits any illicit discharges into your drainage system and allows for enforcement of those. This was a requirement under the first permit that came out in 2003. The permit was updated in 2016, became effective in 2017. They still have those same requirements in there, and they didn't really change the requirements too much for those. The second regulatory piece has to do with construction sites. So this purpose of this second piece is to require any construction that disturbs an acre or more to implement erosion and sediment controls on their sites. This requirement was also part of the original 2003 permit and didn't have a lot of significant changes in the updated MS4 permit, but it's something that we took a look at while we were looking at other components. Then the last piece is a post-construction site stormwater controls, and that is regulating land disturbance greater than or equal to an acre, same as the construction site. And the purpose of that is to have controls in place to treat stormwater runoff after that development takes place. So you'll have new impervious surfaces, you'll have more stormwater runoff. How is that being handled so it's not increasing pollution to surface waters is what it's looking for. So Yarmouth's regulatory mechanism is really found, all 3 of those components are found in Yarmouth's Chapter 145 Stormwater Management Bylaw. It covers the illicit discharge piece as well as the construction and post-construction requirements. We did look at that in 2019, and the bylaw itself was updated, and most of the updates were really just to kind of clean things up and really get the authority enforcement requirements into the bylaw and out of the regulation. So now we are working on the regulation. The regulation is required to be updated by it's June 30th of this year in the existing permit, but they are proposing to extend that to next June, basically June of 2021. But basically the requirements under that, your regulation currently meets the 2003 MS4 permit requirements. The updates are required to meet new requirements in the permit, which are just basically more prescriptive. So before there were a lot of loose and vague items, and they pretty much left it to each municipality to kind of come up with their own regulation. Now they have very specific requirements that they want to see in your regulation. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is what some of those are and how we're incorporating those. So the regulations are really where the meat of the process and application process comes through, as opposed to the bylaw. As I mentioned, the bylaw is more for authority and enforcement, and then the regulations kind of lay out the whole process for that. So that's where the meat of all of the requirements are. So I just kind of wanted to summarize and highlight the key changes that we've made to those regulations. So when you review them, you can kind of focus on those things. So your regulation is split into 3 different sections. The first is called the general provisions, which pretty much apply to everything. So what we did in the applicability section, we ended up moving that previously there was an applicability section in the general provisions. We've now broken that up so you have an applicability section associated with stormwater construction projects, and then a separate applicability for illicit discharges, because they're two different things. One has to do with disturbing land that's greater than an acre. Illicit discharges apply to everything. It's not allowed anywhere. So we just broke that up to kind of provide some clarification for that. The next thing we looked at was administration. Currently, in your current regulation, the Conservation Commission is the administering authority. We have added the Department of Municipal Inspections as an authorized agent in there as well. That way, it's just more clear that they can help with inspection and enforcement, which I think they already do with some of the illicit discharge and other components anyway. The next section we made some changes to were the permits, procedure, and enforcement. So we added some provisions in there to have an administratively complete review process. Right now, there currently isn't anything in there to make sure an application is complete before the clock starts, basically, for you to do your technical review. So we've just put a timeline in there that allows for that first step, similar to your wetlands regulations. Another piece is the public hearing piece. The existing regulations currently allow a 21-day, you basically have 21 days before you can hold the public hearing. We've increased that to 45 days to give a little more time. This is more work for review than, you currently have your wetlands requirements that you're looking at with the Wetlands Protection Act. This is adding some additional items to review. So we wanted to increase the time and give a little more time to review some of those things. Enforcement and penalties, as I already mentioned, those were just taken out of the regulation for simplification to include those in the bylaw, and then keep those two kind of separate. So section 2 of the regulations deals with the construction and post-construction stormwater management. This is really where that land disturbance comes in, and stormwater runoff that's generated as part of disturbing land and as part of the development of land. Again, as I mentioned, the applicability, we did move the applicability from the general provisions to make it more specific to the requirements of each section. So that's been done here. One of the key things that we did is there was previously an exemption that was in the regulation that said that any project that could prove that they were in a watershed that didn't empty into your drainage system was exempt from the regulations. We removed that exemption. The reason for that is there currently was no process to review any. There was no submittal process for somebody to obtain that, approval that yes, you aren't emptying into the MS4. And oftentimes, with the Cape Cod soils being so permeable, infiltration is used to prevent things from going into the MS4 system. And there was just no way to ensure that these systems were being constructed properly, that there was pretreatment. So we decided to take that exemption out after discussing with the group, and just have anything that, people can come to you and ask for a waiver or something else, but we want to see things come through an application process, so it's more formal. We also added an exemption for projects that have received approval for subdivision or that were kind of in that approval process already, because the changes to these regulations won't be in place until June 30th of this year or later. So we didn't want to then have to make them go back and resubmit applications under this process. So it was just to provide a little more flexibility. This piece here, the stormwater performance standards, this is really where the MS4 permit changed from 2003 to the 2016-17 version. As I mentioned before, they are a lot more prescriptive, and there are a lot more requirements of what EPA wants to see in terms of projects that come across and the types of pollutant removal that they would like to see. So some of the things that were added to this section, some of them are associated with the MS4 permit. Others were things that were developed just as part of the stormwater group. And that stormwater group consisted of various people from the town as well as CEI, just kind of going through and walking through the different requirements. So some of the things that were added were to require retaining of the 50-year storm. They're already required to do control of that under the Massachusetts Stormwater Management Policy, or handbook, I should say. And it's something that's kind of expected when people come in for subdivision applications as well. So we just kind of wanted to clarify that. We added a pretreatment requirement to remove 44% of TSS, that's total suspended solids. So where infiltration is used quite a bit down at the Cape, we wanted to make sure that there was some pretreatment for that, so things weren't just going directly into the groundwater. And that's what was used, and it's consistent with the stormwater management handbook. It's just, this will require it for any infiltration as opposed to just those that are in certain areas, for example. Also outlined using the NOAA Atlas 14 for precipitation data. As you know, with climate change, precipitation is, you know, when people are designing things, they're using published data for different size storms and what represents a 2-year storm versus a 50 versus a 100-year storm. This is the most recent information that considers, you know, more recent data as opposed to some of the older publications that are out there. So we wanted to make sure that was referenced. The rest of these, items 4 through 9, are really requirements of the MS4 permit that they require you to put into your regulations. That includes implementation of low impact development strategies where feasible. New developments that come across have to remove 90% of total suspended solids and 60% of total phosphorus. And there are different ways that they can do that. They can do it strictly through treatment BMPs, or they can infiltrate up to 1 inch of runoff, assuming that they meet their 44% TSS removal that we already discussed as well. And then redevelopment projects. So if those come in and are disturbing more than an acre, they are required to remove 80% TSS, which is actually consistent with the Stormwater Management Handbook. And then 50% total phosphorus. And they can do that again through using some type of treatment, best management practices, or they can choose to infiltrate as their treatment process. And that infiltration has to be the 0.8 inches of runoff. Also, we are also allowing offsite mitigation. So if for some reason a site can't meet these removal requirements, they do have an option in there to do some offsite mitigation and basically provide that level of treatment somewhere else, or that pollutant removal that they should have attained. We've also added an exemption for roadway redevelopment projects that are limited to maintenance and improvement of existing roadways. So if there's a roadway project within the town where they're just, maybe they're repaving and they're not increasing the impervious area, that would be exempt from having to meet these requirements. And then there are also a few requirements in there for impaired waters, and it was really just to kind of bring attention to, if you're in a water body or you're discharging to a water body that's impaired for nitrogen, for example, then they should be looking at these treatment BMPs should also be looking at optimization for nitrogen removal. So there's a little bit of language in there like that. And again, those all came from the MS4 permit. We also have an operation and maintenance plan section, which was already in there. We added one item in there to require submission of an annual certification that documents that whatever BMPs are in place that are to be maintained privately are being inspected and maintained. So once a year, whoever owns the property would have to submit a report to the town to say, yeah, we inspected it and this is what we did. Whether or not they maintained it or didn't need to, some type of report. So you can keep track of that. Under the final reports, you currently have a requirement to submit as-built plans, but there's no timeline in there for that. So we did add a timeline to say that as-built had to be submitted within 3 months of completing construction. So it's really just to kind of put an end line for that. So those pretty much sum up the requirements, and I think those are the majority of the requirements from the MS4 permit go into that section 2 area. So the rest of these have to do with the illicit discharge detection and elimination section. So that's section 3 of the permit that deals with illicit discharges. So for that one, we made a couple of changes to the exemptions. We removed, there was currently an exemption in there for uncontaminated pumped water and water from crawl space pumps. We've removed that altogether to not allow that as an exemption. We've had separate discussions with DPW and working on doing some guidance basically for people that have sump pumps. The town wants to avoid people just kind of having hoses that run across their property and then discharge onto the sidewalk and into their system, because it creates other issues. In the winter, you can have freezing conditions. And so we're trying to handle those through other methods, basically. And then we also added some conditions for dechlorination, because dechlorination of swimming pool water, so basically discharge of swimming pool water is allowed. It's exempt from being an illicit discharge as long as the water has been dechlorinated. So we really just kind of beefed that up a little bit to outline what does dechlorination mean? You know, what do you have to do to meet that dechlorinated water? The other thing we did for the emergency suspension of storm drainage system access, similar to the other sections, we just added that the Department of Municipal Inspections and also DPW had the authority to issue suspension orders, because as I mentioned, they currently already deal with a lot of the illicit discharge issues that may come up. So that pretty much summarizes what we did to those regulations. I tried to really focus on highlighting the things that were significant, or, you know, the more major changes. Everything else, there might be a little bit of formatting and maybe a couple other things moved around, but it didn't really change the content of things. So I guess I just want to open that up for questions now, if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Any questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, I have a,
Oh.
trying to find raised hands. I got it.
That's okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Rebecca, thank you very much. You mentioned in section 2, the decontamination of water, particularly as far as phosphorus is concerned. What about the nitrogen?
So the MS4 permit currently only requires a percentage removal for phosphorus. It doesn't require anything for nitrogen. We could certainly add something if that is something that the town wanted to do. So right now, nitrogen, the only requirement for nitrogen is if there is if you're going to be discharging to a nitrogen impaired water, the language in there is just that they have to optimize their BMPs to also remove nitrogen. And it's kind of left vague, so it gives the commission a little flexibility to determine, you know, what you want to see for that. You certainly could put in a removal requirement. They did do that in New Hampshire, actually. EPA did put in a nitrogen removal requirement for the Great Bay communities only in the New Hampshire permit. So we didn't want to go more stringent than what the MS4 permit required at this time.
My concern is that nitrogen is a major health consideration on Cape Cod, particularly because we operate with the Title V ineffective septic systems. And we have polluted our bays and our estuaries. We're in terrible shape down here. And I think any regulation should certainly recognize the dilemma that we're in on Cape Cod.
Yep, and to that point, so when they did all of these, and TMDL, if I didn't explain, that's a total maximum daily load. But when all of the studies were completed, and there are a lot of them down in the Cape, you are exactly right that it is the septic systems that are the major issue for this. So when those studies were performed, they had determined that stormwater was a very, very small contribution of nitrogen in comparison to the septic systems, which is why that hasn't been a huge target down there. So just, that's the other reason that it hasn't been really called out as a big target.
Well, anything you could do would certainly be appreciated by the residents of Cape Cod.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are you all set?
Yes, sir.
All right, anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. This is
Yep, David?
Yeah, has to do with swimming pool discharge. Having a bunch of swimming pools in my neighborhood and walking around the fall and seeing all the water hitting the streets and getting into the storm drains. So what you're saying under these regulations is they dechlorinate their water. It's okay to go into the storm drain, or if the storm drain fills, like it does in one of my neighbors, making its way into the bay.
Yes, the dechlorination is more of a pollutant thing. Are you talking about it causing a flooding issue instead?
Well, it depends. Yes, this is one that I'm just thinking of that when I was there this fall, walking around, I noticed that it had so much water that it filled the storm drain.
Mhm.
And then went further, it's right around the corner is Lewis Bay, and made its way eventually, not a whole lot, but some of it into the bay. So my two concerns are, is that okay? And number two is, how do we know that the water was dechlorinated? I mean, is this a trust? Do the people who own swimming pools know they're supposed to do this?
It is, unless you had some type of registration process where, so if somebody wanted to discharge their swimming pool water, for example, that they would have to file almost like a permit to say,
Mhm.
hey, I'm going to be discharging this water, and they can provide proof that it's been dechlorinated, which is what some communities do with sump pumps. Because this has come up with the sump pump issue, which I had mentioned, and we did take the sump pumps and not allowing that water to go into the system because of just the multiple problems of,
Mhm.
like I said, things running across the sidewalk, which I think
Yeah,
is.
that was my next question, but we'll get
Yeah.
into that in a minute. But,
So for those, what they were looking at, or what we were looking at doing, is having another regulation that doesn't allow those to be discharged into the drainage system, and that people have to handle those on their site.
Which is, I think I'm just to break in, our regulations right now, anything within conservation jurisdiction requires that they release on site, or they need. So that's for our regulations though.
So, yeah, I would like to see some kind of method of people having to apply for the fact that they're going to dechlorinate their water and then discharge it, because I don't see that happening.
Okay, thanks, David. Anybody else? I'm not seeing anybody, and I'm not,
Ed, I've been raising my hand and lowering it.
and we aren't getting any public comment on this at this point, but
Ed,
yep, Rick, is that Rick?
I'm trying. Yes, it is. I just wanted to support what Commissioner Durkin said. We are very much in a problem situation with our estuaries and all of our waterways and ponds in Yarmouth. There is a significant nitrogen problem there. And I think if you include that, we'll certainly improve the effect of lawn fertilizers and other items that will contribute to our nitrogen problem. So I'd certainly encourage you to do that.
I'm not sure where I got disconnected, but I do have concerns also about people pumping from basements or into streets, or certainly into storm drains, which one person does in our neighborhood.
Again, I don't think they're supposed to be doing that,
No.
period.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, I will take care of that. It's hard to do unless it's rain, unless they're doing it. You don't see it because it's hidden, but when it's raining, you see it. So I will take care of it when it happens.
Well, and that was something, as I said, we were talking about this with DPW, and they were looking to strengthen other areas of regulations to prohibit those discharges from happening into their drainage system. And then there was some public education information of what you can do with that water that was being prepared for distribution. So hopefully that helps with that.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else in the commission? Raise your hand electronically. Okay, if not, Kelly, do you have any comments or concerns?
No, but I wanted to just make a procedural comment that just for members of the public and the audience, that this was an initial review of the proposed changes to the regulations for the commission, and that we are going to have public comment sessions as part of the commission meetings before these regulations are finalized. So they will be published for the public to review, and they will be advertised in a legal notice and agenda for when they are back on the agenda for public comment and questions and comments as well.
All right, thank you, Kelly. If there's no further questions from the commissioners, then I'd like to say thank you for Rebecca for making some time and giving a wonderful presentation for us.
There is a raised hand in the audience. I don't know if you want to address that now or leave it at the moment and until
Is that
we
the
have
one? Is that the? I think it's the.
the phone number.
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
Dawn Marie, can you unmute them?
Five zero 8-776-7219. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Nicholas Fiorello from 4 Glenwood Street in Yarmouth.
All right, and what are you calling for?
I think I was asked to be a part of this meeting. They're on the end of the agenda, ocean vacations, I think.
Yeah, it's a
We're
violation at the
actually
end of
nowhere
the
near right
agenda.
now. Yeah. Okay, so it'll be a little bit before we get to you, but we will get back to you.
Oh,
then,
I'm
sir.
sorry.
Okay.
Thank
No,
you,
that's all right.
guys.
We
I'm
just wanted to
sorry.
check where you
I
were.
just
Okay, thank you. All right. So if not, is Rebecca still there? So thank you, Rebecca.
Okay.
All right, last any questions? If not, we will move on to our next order of business, which is a request for determination of applicability. This was continued from May 7th and May 21st, 2020 for Aunt Edith's Neighborhood Association, Aunt Edith's Road, South Yarmouth, replacement in kind of 10 12-inch pilings associated with a licensed pier in Bass River. The applicant is asking that we continue. It's for revised plans. Is that right, Kelly?
Yes, we were asking for a revised RDA that would bring the existing pier and float system into compliance with the existing permit. And I had a message from Dan this week. I think he's actually in the audience, but a message from him asking to continue while he makes those changes. I don't know if you want to check in
Okay.
with him in the audience.
Yeah, Dawn Marie, could you bring Dan Ojala up, please?
Dan, you're.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think Kelly summarized it very well. We just wanted to update the board that the association, which consists of a number of people, did finally had a formal meeting and decided that they would agree to rearrange that float to be the pilings back to their original configuration. And I just learned of this the other day, so I hadn't had a chance to revise the plans yet, and certainly not to give you time to review it before today's meeting. So I will try and get that in Friday or so, with plenty of time for the next meeting for you to review. I think the quick solution, if the board would agree to it, would be that the southernmost float was, egregiously longer than was permitted. But come to find out, that's actually the longest southern section is actually 2 floats. If we remove one of them, it'll actually be 4 or 5 feet shorter than what was permitted and just a tiny bit wider. So if you'd indulge us to that, it's a very modest modification, makes the overall length shorter than is permitted, but just a tiny bit wider, then perhaps that would be something that would be acceptable. to the board. But we'll address that once I get the plan.
Okay, yeah.
in.
Yeah, if you would put that, so you're good for the 18th then, Dan?
That sounds fine. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Good. Do I have a motion to continue this hearing until June 18th, 2020?
So
Ellie
moved,
Lawrence.
Tom Durkin.
Tom Durkin moved, Ellie Lawrence seconded. Kelly, or sorry, Dawn Marie, could you call the roll, please?
I'll call the roll. It's Kelly.
Oh, okay, Kelly will call the roll.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
and Mulhern.
Aye.
And just for the record, I made a note that we had our two missing members join us around 4:40, Commissioner Huggins and Commissioner Bishop. So we have
Okay.
a full commission now.
All right, thank you. And that was unanimous, is that correct?
Sorry, yes, it was.
Okay, there you go. All right, thank you. Next order of business is a notice of intent continued from May 7th, May 21st, 2020 for SE 83-2232, Christopher Haley, 190 Blue Rock Road, South Yarmouth, proposed reconfiguration of dock within Bass River. That is also going to have to be continued. This is for Waterways, because Waterways isn't meeting, is that right?
That's correct. They are meeting next week, was my understanding. So, but they did ask to continue to July 16th.
Okay, all right, so do I have a motion or a motion to continue this to July 16th, 2020?
So moved, Ellie Lawrence.
Ellie Lawrence moved, seconded
Second, Rick Bishop.
by Rick Bishop. Uh,
So you're dropping out, but I'll call the roll. Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye,
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously to continue to July 16th.
all right, thank you. Next order of business, notice of intent, continued from May 7th and May 21st, 2020 for SE 83-2230 Red Jacket Beach Limited Partnership, 28 South Shore Drive, South Yarmouth, Massachusetts, for beach raking and beach nourishment on a coastal beach.
Mr. Chairman, just as I did in the past, I'm recusing myself from these.
Okay, so let the record reflect that Commissioner Bishop has recused himself for this and the other two Red Jacket hearings. And Kelly, we have our natural heritage comments, is that right?
That is true. Yeah, we do have the natural heritage comments, and so recommend that those be included in the order of conditions.
All right, is there anybody in the, is there somebody
Yeah,
representing?
Bob
Bob
Perry, you
Free
can go
here.
There you
ahead.
go. Hi, Bob, didn't see you there earlier.
I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to turn it over to the commission. Anybody in the commission have any concerns, comments, questions? Raise your little blue hand if you do. If not, it doesn't look like it. Kelly, do you have any comments or concerns?
The only comment that I would make is that we have the plan, the notes on the plan match the conditions in the order rather than the statement that was included that the work would be done as it had been done in the past. So if we can just update the notes in the plan that reflect the conditions within the order.
Kelly, would you like that? We could drop off 2 stamped hard copies or 1?
One hard copy would be fine, thank you, and an electronic copy.
Okay. And as I understand it, the comments of the NHESP are incorporated to the order as written.
That's right.
Okay, we're on board with that.
Okay, Kelly, and the only other question we had was like we still had concerns about equipment on the beach. I don't think we should handle it here, but do we have any further comment or questions on that?
No, the equipment on the beach and the work done outside of the permit is still an issue to be resolved. If you want to address it separately to these hearings to allow the permits to be issued for them to go ahead and do work, and then we can address
Yeah.
the violation separately, then that would be one way of.
Yeah, I would like to close out the hearing for this right now, but I do think we should also consider enforcement issues at the next meeting. Is there any comments, concerns?
I also received a request from the applicant today to move ahead with work under the permits, which may happen before we've actually been able to have the permits issued and recorded, just given the timing of the season and the businesses starting to reopen. So I just wanted to talk about that with you guys and make sure you were okay, and how much leeway there is there for allowing them to go ahead and start the beach raking work. Obviously, I'll try and get permits issued as soon as possible, but the timeframes are tight.
Personally, I don't think we should do it, only because if we say go ahead and do it, then we have no order of conditions that we can hold them to. And given their record in the past, I am hesitant to allow that. But that's my opinion. What's the rest of the board say?
I do have to agree with you, Ed. There would be no regulation for them to do what, there would be no way that we can regulate what they do if we don't have an order or condition already in the pocket.
Other than if there would be a violation, so I agree.
I'm in favor
Paul?
of conditions as well, Ed.
Okay, Tom, hold on for one. I'll get you. Paul had his hand raised, so I'm gonna let go to Paul first, and then to Tom.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with you, Ed.
Okay, Tom.
I agree with you, Ed. How's that?
All right, that's short and sweet.
So if we have the order, they can start work when the order is issued, and it also needs to be recorded with the Registry of Deeds, or can they begin work once they receive the original order of conditions?
Once they receive the order of conditions, I'm assuming they're going to run that right over to the registry as quickly as they possibly can.
Yeah, I don't know that the registry is accepting walk-ins at the moment, so the process takes a little longer, I think.
But yeah,
But they
I mean, it's
should, they may
something
be opening soon.
they should. Is my understanding, is that correct?
Sorry, I
They-
couldn't.
I'm sorry, I'm having connectivity problems here.
Okay.
They should be able to file with the registry the minute that they get it,
Yes,
they receive it from you, is that correct?
they should be able to do that. Yes, it's just when they receive it back, maybe slightly delayed.
By
So
mail.
I think that would cover us at least. I mean,
Mhm.
if they did that right away, then at least we're showing some good faith and trying to work with them, but I think we need to shoot first before we let them do any work.
Okay, so I will get the orders issued, and then once they have the original order in hand, then they would be able to meet with me for the pre-season meeting and begin work.
Yeah, so but it's contingent. They're doing the work and starting the work is contingent upon you having that on-site visit with them first. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so I'm fine with that then.
Okay.
Anybody else on the board from that? Is there anybody in the audience who has any comments or concerns with this?
I don't see any hands up.
All right, if that's the case, then would somebody like to make a motion to approve with the order of conditions, and I'll let you go from there. Is anybody who want to makes that motion?
This is Ellie here. I make a motion that we approve the order of conditions as stated in the conversation.
All right, thank you, Ellie. Is there a second?
Second, David.
David seconded. Kelly, would you call the roll?
Bishop?
Recuse.
Oh,
No,
recuse,
he's
sorry.
recused, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Durkin?
Aye.
Bernstein?
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
So the motion carries 6-0 with one recused.
All right, and then in terms of enforcement, with this, is the board in agreement that they would like to discuss enforcement at the next meeting?
Okay with me?
Yes, that's
Okay.
okay with me.
Paul, David, anybody else?
I agree.
Okay, Ellie,
Okay.
Tom's good, okay. All right, so then Kelly, would you be good enough to for next week then for enforcement action?
Action on the next agenda, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, next agenda.
Okay.
All right, do we need a motion for that, or we're good?
I don't know if we need a motion for it.
Let's make a motion for
Let's
that
make a
and
motion.
we'll vote. So is there a motion
Okay.
to initiate enforcement action to be discussed next on the next agenda?
So moved.
David, so moved.
David moved, Paul seconded. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Sure. So Bishop is recused. Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0 with one recused.
All right, thank you, Kelly. All right, next order of business is 2020, May 21st, 2020 LTD partnership and Edge of the Sea Incorporated 291 and 301 South Shore Drive, South Yarmouth for beach raking and beach nourishment on a coastal beach. Same issues. We have the.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a second? Could we
Sure, yeah,
ask
go ahead.
all of the panelists to mute themselves if they're not speaking, because we've got some background noise. Thank you.
It's probably that, Rick. All right, so the same issues as before. We have we've received NHESP comments, and same thing with the notes to reflect the order. Is that right, Kelly?
That's right. We also have the supplemental narrative for the dune restoration for this project. So that was provided to you today. It's a one-page narrative and protocol for the timeline of the dune creation. So do you want to run through that, or is everyone comfortable with that?
I haven't even read it yet, to be honest with you.
I can run through. Oh, well, Bob is
Everybody else is
the man who
comfortable
wrote
with
it.
it.
So
Well, I can tell you, summarize, it's one page, but here's our thinking. We are proposing that fenced area, which is an equivalent area to the dune. And we went back, about 12 years to get the size that it was. And so that dune area is already exhibiting a heightened terrain. As soon as the order of conditions is available, the fence goes in. There's no lag time. And our opinion, and I think you'll agree, you know enough about these things, that a natural dune will be more stable with wind bedded sand. That was our premise. And between now and December, we believe that that dune will grow in there. And it will be December when beach grass would be planted as soon as we possibly can, 2 columns per hole, 12 inches on center. If there's a indication that more sand needs to be added, then more sand will be added before the grass is planted. The dune will then continue to accrue volume, and we don't know how it will behave, but my experience with dune growth, when we built dunes before, either with Christmas trees on the beaches or snow fence, is you will see an increase in the elevation of the beach. So that fence is standard snow fence. It will be neat. The establishment would certainly want to have a neat snow fence. It will remain there. I think that's one of the problems with the former dune. I know Kelly and I reviewed this. That dune was susceptible to traffic, bounding activity, storms, but with the fence in place, the dune should persist where it's being created. The timeline is, as I've said, we will have that planted by mid-December, and there will be follow-up inspection of the grass and the fence before the next season starts. And then, of course, if any further grass is necessary, it could be planted the following December. The fence remains effectively as a dune area guard for permanent. It's functional guard. It will protect the dune and grow the dune simultaneously. That's our summary. I see no reason to use artificial sand there. Those are big, broad beaches. They should be able to grow a dune naturally.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Any questions among the commission?
Yes, I have had my hand raised.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I think I appreciate very much the supplemental narrative on the dune restoration. I think it's a masterful job of circumvention. It in no way accepts responsibility by the owners of this property for the decimation of a dune. And
Tom?
it sets up the fact that the dune will be moved, not where nature intended, but which is most convenient for beachgoers. As I say, congratulations on the supplemental narrative.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Anybody else on the board?
Well,
Kelly?
this is Ellie.
Okay, good.
I do have to agree with Tom on that. The dune, maybe over natural use would migrate back farther, but this seems to be a, bait and switch sort of thing.
Can I throw my 2 cents worth in to help? And I believe firmly that the largest problem with that hummock that was in the beach is that it was isolated. I think it may have been more protected had it been fenced off, but the growth of this dune at the landward edge of the beach is more consistent with the definition of a dune, and I think it has more function where we've proposed it. And I agree, we could, think that this is a great benefit for the resort. I think it's a little bit of both. It's a practical location for the dune, and I think it will give that dune a much better chance of persisting and growing, perhaps growing seaward.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. Anybody else on the commission? All right, Kelly, do you have any comments or concerns?
No, I have no further comments.
And is this in place of any kind of enforcement issues that we're dealing with then? Is that what we're assuming?
So we still have the enforcement issues that we discussed with the previous order, but the dune restoration was to address the enforcement issues from the previous permit. And so by addressing them within this permit, we can then close out the previous permit.
Okay, so we're all good with just by closing this out.
By issuing this order and closing out the old permit, then we will be all good in terms of addressing that violation,
Okay.
if this is acceptable.
All right, any further discussion amongst the commission? Is there anybody in the audience who has any comments or concerns?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion then?
This is Ellie. I make a motion. We approve this as discussed.
All right, thank you, Ellie. Is there a second?
Tom Durkin, second.
Thank you, Tom, second. And Kelly, would you please call the roll?
Bishop is recused, so Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
So the motion carries 6-0 with one recused.
All right, thank you. Next order of, where am I here? Next order of business is another notice of intent continued from May 7th, 2020 and May 21st, 2020 for SE 83-2231 Riviera Beach Limited Partnership for 327 South Shore Drive, South Yarmouth, beach raking and beach nourishment on a coastal beach. Again, Bob, you're in the audience for this, and same issues again, right, Kelly?
That is correct. Sorry, I can't keep up with the slides. I'm sure everyone's seen the pictures already.
This is more analogous to Red Jacket. There's no dune development here, and NHESP is mirror image for the others.
Okay, and we still have that. So there is an enforcement issue with this one, especially with removing that build up there. So I think we should handle this one the same way as we did the previous hearing. I don't see anything wrong in closing this hearing out tonight, but I think we should also put this site on the enforcement track as well for next agenda, as an agenda item for next agenda or next meeting.
Just to clarify, just to clarify, the previous property was also the subject of the enforcement, right? So we're going to have 3 properties? Because we voted on the first one on 28.
Right, I thought we didn't have to worry about the enforcement issue with that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the enforcement issue with regard to the dune. But the enforcement issue with regard to the equipment on the beach 2 weeks ago is unresolved. So yeah, so I'm sorry.
right.
So we could have a motion to pursue the enforcement for both of those properties within one motion at the next meeting, if you want to do that.
Okay, so let's take care of the motion for approving beach raking and nourishment first, and then we'll go back and do we'll finish up with the 2 motions or 1 motion for the 2 enforcement issues after we close this portion of the hearing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Bob, did you have anything else to add to this?
I don't. I feel that it is, except for the occurrence of this activity that you will address later, this one was very straightforward and had many just identical issues of sediment and wildlife habitat as the others.
Okay.
In other words, simplest. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you, Bob. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Kelly, any further comment?
No further comment from me.
Okay, anybody in the audience have any comments on this one?
I don't see any raised hands.
All right, so commissioners, if I could get first to get a motion to close out this hearing, and then we'll have another motion then after that. But for now, do I have a motion to issue an order of conditions for this project?
David, so moved.
Ellie, second.
I didn't hear who made the motion, but Ellie seconded.
David made the motion.
Okay, all right, so it's moved and seconded. Kelly, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bishop is recused. Commissioner Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern. Mulhern.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-0 with 1 recused.
Thank you.
Okay, that's 6-0 with 1 recused, right?
That's correct.
All right, and then is there a motion to pursue enforcement action for the previous, this was for the Blue Water LTD Partnership and Edge of the Sea, as well as for Riviera Beach Limited Partnership. This is a motion to initiate a discussion of enforcement action at our next, as an agenda item for our next meeting. Is there a motion for that, to that effect?
Ellie, so moved.
All right, is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you, Ellie and Tom. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
I have a question, please.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, just a quick one, maybe before we vote. There was an assurance by, I think it was Mr. Vieira at the last meeting, that he'd find out what was going on almost immediately regarding that activity on the beach. Am I to understand that we still don't know anything about it, and that's why we're going to, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to continue this for the enforcement?
No, we're going to be doing this because we need to. We want to keep the enforcement and the actual proposed work separate.
Okay, that's fine, but we didn't get any information about this from Mr. Vieira.
I don't know if there was any necessarily. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kelly.
Mr. Vieira did communicate to me that he does have a response with regard to what occurred. So he's probably prepared to speak to that tonight, or if you want to leave that for the next meeting, then we can do.
I'm okay the next meeting. I want to take the time, but I just was wondering if you had any additional information. Thank you.
Do you want something submitted in writing for the next meeting so you have a chance to review it before the meeting?
That'd be
In
nice.
response?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. If he's got something that would be useful.
Okay. Shall I call the roll?
Do you want to call the roll, please?
Bishop is recused. Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0 with 1 recused.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Next order of business is another continued notice of intent, continued from May 7th and May 21st, 2020 for SE 83-2228 William McDermott for 5 Salt Meadow Road, West Yarmouth, raise and replace of an existing single-family dwelling with appurtenances. And I believe that's Lynn, is that right? Oh, thank you, Bob Perry. I forgot to say thank you.
No, thank you, Chairman. Thank you and the commission.
All right, is Lynn there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you see me?
We can't see you.
Okay, I just like to be oriented.
Good.
Thank you. I'm representing WSMI Development LLC. Other property or project proponents might be here, but I can't see them either. So I'll just go ahead and do the presentation, and if there's a question I can't answer, perhaps the PE or the applicant is here. This application is for the raise and rebuild of a single family dwelling. We asked for a continuance initially because we wanted to address the concerns of both your administrator and the neighbors who contacted me. And we thought we would make those changes to the plan or address those concerns before presenting the application to the full commission. Excuse me, full commission. So the plans that you got originally really haven't changed. What's changed is the preservation of the perimeter vegetation on the property. The only wetland resource, BVW resource, is a salt marsh across from Salt Meadow Road. The property is actually 64 feet away from it. The only construction existing or proposed is the slab, which is a little basketball court, which is proposed to be demolished. The rest of the property is within land subject to coastal storm flowage only. The fill on the property is driven by both Title V and FEMA regulations. the Title V regulations requiring the soil absorption system to be elevated 5 feet above adjusted groundwater, and the FEMA regulations, of course, requiring the house to be elevated in conformance with FEMA regulations. So what we've proposed differently than your first plan is to preserve the perimeter vegetation. So what's happened with my landscape plan is where I had previously proposed landscaping in areas that were disturbed. Now we're showing where the mature trees along the perimeter are going to be preserved. And we accomplished that by establishing a work limit line interior of those perimeter trees and limiting access into the site in the area of the existing and proposed drive. So you can look at the landscape plan. Hopefully everybody has a copy of it. Actually, if you have an electronic copy, it's probably clearer. And we end up preserving many mature red cedar, really big 3-trunked oak in the back, and American holly. There's a really pretty paper birch that I'm sure was planted, but it's a nice tree to preserve. There's also a hedge of yew, again planted by by the previous owner, but it makes a nice border or a nice buffer to the street from the house. So we're proposing to preserve that as well. Another concern of both your administrator and the neighbors was the impact of this new construction on an existing water problem in the area. So we retained Mark Dibb, he's a professional engineer, and he did an analysis of the site, both existing and post-construction. I only gave one copy of his complete calculations because there were 64 pages. And I gave everybody else the summary, his letter summarizing his findings. And his findings are that post-construction, there'll actually be less water coming off the site than what exists now. And we did revise the site plan to show 2 drainage systems specified to address the roof runoff for the new house. I usually like to keep my presentation short, so I'll do this even in the Zoom format and see if you have any questions.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Commissioners, any questions? Very quiet set of commissioners tonight. No questions?
I have no questions.
All right, thank you, Ellie. Kelly, do you have any comments or concerns?
My concerns have been addressed through the revisions to the plan. So thank you to Lynn for going away and making those changes. It made things a lot easier. So I don't have any additional comments.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody in the audience who has any comments or questions about this project? I see a Daniel Curran. Domery, if you could unmute him, please.
My name is Mary Conley, and somehow my son-in-law helped me with a Zoom call one night, so it has his name on it.
I'm sorry. Thank you for making that clarification.
My name is Mary Conley. I live on, my address is 7 Cove Road. I live directly behind this property, and I am one of the neighbors who expressed concern. There's always been a water issue in front of this property, and I just want to make sure that the water isn't diverted so that it comes toward the back of the property and into mine, because I already have water issues. I have pumps going up all the time when there's severe rain, so.
Okay, thank you.
You want me to address that a little bit?
Yeah, if you would, just please.
There is a swale that we proposed, and where you see the swale is actually the Connolly properties on the other side of that. So that will capture some of the runoff, and we're keeping the vegetation. Obviously, mature trees going to address some of the runoff. The PE, we did go to the expense of, actually the applicant went to the expense of hiring a professional engineer to do these calculations, and all our runoff will be contained on site. In the post-construction situation will be better than what's existing. The Connolly property, as I understand it, the problem is that she's groundwater issues. So the surface runoff isn't really going to impact her. She has an existing condition at her property separate from anything we're doing on our site.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
That, I never had the water problems I had until but this is probably about 15 years ago, that the house next to it was built up high. And the way they graded it, the water comes right towards me. And I've had more issues since then. So that's my concern about this one. I never had the water issues that I have had in the last few years.
Okay, well, and again, I mean, the other issue with that is that they can't be grading or causing any more water to run off the property. So that's a building code issue. It's a requirement that you know, you're not allowed to change the grade in such a way that it would cause any more water to run off on a butter's property that wouldn't already be running off. If you follow what I'm saying there.
Uh-huh.
But that's a building, it's part of the building code that you're not allowed to put any more water off onto the abutter's property.
I'm not sure that is in our building code, actually. Not 100% on that, because it comes up before and it's generally treated as a civil matter.
Yeah, it's.
So that's not in the building code? Because that is in a lot of towns.
I'm sorry. As far as I know, I thought it was a state building code. But you know, either way, if you were getting an increase in water, that would certainly be a civil matter that you could pursue civilly through the court system.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not a conservation issue. Is what we're basically saying.
Okay. But Kelly has assured me in an email today that this will alleviate all the problem of the engineer has certified that this will be an improvement over the existing conditions.
Yeah, I just read the statement from the engineer who is certifying that the proposed drainage improvements will provide an improvement over the existing conditions.
I want to make clear that we're not saying that this construction is going to alleviate her flooding problem.
Oh, no, I understand that.
Okay. It's just that post-construction is going to be an improvement over runoff than existing.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, just so everybody knows, I completely missed what Lynn said. I want to be clear. After that, I missed everything that she said. So I'm assuming everybody's happy with that. Yes, good.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Are there anybody else? Is there anybody else in the audience who has any comments, concerns?
I don't see any other hands up.
All right. Any further discussion amongst the commission? If not, would somebody like to make a motion?
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions approving this project at SE 83-2228 at 5 Salt Meadow Road with the conditions as provided by the Conservation Administrator and any additional conditions.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Ellie.
Ellie seconded. All right, Kelly, if you'd call the roll, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins. Sorry, did I miss that? Huggins?
He's still on mute.
Paul, I'm you.
Aye. There we go. Sorry.
And Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
All right, next order of business, there's another continued hearing from May 7th and May 21st, 2020 for SE 83-2229 for Robert J. and Rita M. Davis, 177 River Street, South Yarmouth, Massachusetts, to maintain 2 existing 10 by 20 floats in place of the 6 by 10 permitted floats and 1 existing additional float pile. Understanding this is also going to be continued to, is it July 16th or July 18th?
June 18th at this point. If we're hoping if there's a waterways meeting next week, then we would be able to hear it at our next meeting.
Okay, so it's
June
18th.
16th.
June 16th?
Isn't it the 16th?
No, if for waterways is the 16th, we'd be the 18th, right? We're the 18th, no matter what. So,
Yes.
so
18th.
we're going to have a motion to continue to June 18th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Second, David.
Second, David. David seconded. Kelly, would you call the roll, please? Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
You have to unmute Kelly.
Sorry, I was putting the space bar down, but it wasn't working, unfortunately. Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Next order of business, another notice of intent continued from May 21st, 2020 for SE 83-2234. Andrew and Cynthia Richards, 1069 Great Island Road, West Yarmouth, proposed raise and replace of a single family dwelling in the buffer zone to a coastal beach and coastal bank on Nantucket Sound. And I believe we were looking for an updated plan with more mitigation planting. Is that right, Kelly?
That is correct.
And we have received that.
We received
understand.
an updated plan with 200 square feet of mitigation area.
Okay, and are you good with that?
I am good with that.
All right, any discussion amongst the commission? Anybody in the audience who have any comments or concerns with this? If not, may I have a motion?
Hi, Ed. Bob Perry. Just wanted to chime in. We also submitted some information that was requested, and you have it if you wanted it. It's nothing more than a comparison, and there was quite a bit of building removal from the 50-foot buffer, so we put those details in the letter.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you were representing them, right, Bob?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, and just so noted. All right, is there a motion to issue an order of conditions?
So moved.
Rick made the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Ellie.
Ellie seconded. All, Kelly, would you please call the roll?
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. We'll do a good job there.
All right, next order of business is a request for an amended order of conditions for SE 83-2041 Jeffrey Chisholm, 66A River Street, South Yarmouth. Request to amend an existing order of conditions with regrading of mitigation area to reduce stormwater runoff. And I believe we had asked for an updated plan with showing those contours, and we have gotten, I believe, everything that we were asking for at this point, right, Kelly?
Sorry. Yes, we have received a plan which you should all have a copy of, and I'm showing on the screen, which shows the contours onto the neighboring property and the proposed changes to those contours. And then it shows the area of vegetation that will be replaced. And there are details on here as to what they will be replaced with. So yeah, we have a good level of detail now as to what the proposed work is.
All right, I'm good with this. Anybody on the commission have any comments or concerns?
I do.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, Kelly, will you be having the opportunity to make sure that these mitigations have been accomplished? Will you be visiting after a certain period of time?
Yes, well, the property owner will need to apply for a certificate of compliance once the project is complete. So the commission and myself will have the opportunity to review all of the work and the mitigation plantings. If you want to set a time frame for within which those plantings are put in after the regrading is done, then certainly that's something that you could do just to make sure it's done in a timely manner.
In a timely manner and to be accomplished, what is your suggestion for a date?
I'm assuming that they want to go ahead and do the work relatively soon. So we're starting to get into the warmer weather now, so they may need to wait until the fall to do some of these plantings. Maybe they could give us an update on what the plan is for that.
Okay.
Do you want to say, since we have to, we're probably going to have to wait for planting season to resume again. Do you want to just say October 1st? Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me, and that we request that the conservation administrator review the plantings no later than October 30th.
Okay, their order of conditions is set to expire relatively soon. Is that right, Kelly?
I can check the file. I know that they had had an extension. So no, I think it might have a little bit more time. I will need to check. I don't have that. If you give me just a second, I'll just grab the other part of the file.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if we necessarily need to. I know it's been extended already once, so.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you're extended here till December 21, 2021.
Thank you.
2021. Okay, so they have more than enough time to get everything accomplished. And so I don't think that's unreasonable then to say October 1st with conservation administrator review by August or October 31st then.
It's not unreasonable. Your interest is completely consistent with the applicant's. He wants to move on and get this taken care of.
Okay, all right. That sounds good to me then. Any other discussion amongst Ellie, you have a question?
Yeah, I just question why we're tearing out all those mature bushes to replant smaller ones that may create a runoff issue going into the river.
I did address that for you. I've spoken to Jeff, and what was interesting was that the work limit for the original project, and it's not my, I have no idea what, why they did this. I believe Jeff took those shrubs to be somewhat useful, valuable, and the work limit for the original project went right through those shrubs. It was not realistic to think that they could have fully survived the project, so the work limit did not pay attention to those shrubs. But when the project started, they tucked the work limit up against, tried to save the shrubs. And there was a time when I thought those shrubs, when the old house was there and the lawn was established and everything was just like it should be, those shrubs looked better than they do today. They've been beaten by a lot of different things. And I know that Jeff mentioned this before, that the Wilkinson folks felt that, and you may agree or disagree, but I have proposed in consultation with everybody that's doing the landscape here, we counted up what's in there, and the proposal is to put back what's there, but to amend the soil properly, to give them the care they need. And if everybody, realizes it, some of these coastal native shrubs will do quite well with a little help. So I think many shrubs we have near our homes, they do run through a period where they get quite leggy. And that's the problem with these shrubs. They've gotten very leggy, they're very wind battered, and by replacing them in kind, it won't be long before you have a nice stand of very similar native shrubs there. And that's my understanding of why these are being taken out, is because they were tried to be salvaged and now they're being replaced.
Well, my thought on that is if they were that wind battered, what's going to protect the younger ones, the newer ones, from having the same issue?
They're going to be not just in pure sand. They're going to be surrounded by the various Wilkinson plantings. They're going to have a much better chance of growth. If you start off with a leggy shrub that's just been left to go for 10 years, I think these would stand a very good chance. I don't know that the other ones could just be pruned back. There may be some way to do that, but it's limited to where you can grade. You basically leave a depression if you just were to not do the grading where these shrubs are. So I thought it made sense to replace them. They're not antiques. They might be 15 to 20 years old.
Thank you, Bob.
I have a question. David?
Sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. I walked around the back of the house the other day, and I don't know whether it's me or is that a patio which says patio location under construction? To me, it looked like a swimming pool. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just curious.
It's a swimming pool. Yes.
Okay, because when I'm looking at the plans, I don't see it on here.
Well, it was not detailed enough. When we put this plan together, we're showing you the patio outline. The original approved plan shows a pool. There was a shape change to that pool that I understand was not something I had any dealings with, but it's been reviewed and approved. It went from a kidney shape to a rectangular shape. But when the details of the house outline that appear on this plan were put on this plan, the pool was not finished. So we did not put the pool shape on this plan.
So is the pool going further out from where it says approximately? No. Okay.
No, it is within that patio. In fact,
Okay.
on this plan, you can see the old patio outline, which is an arc, and the revised patio is the rectangle, and the pool is within that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any further discussion amongst the commission? Is there anybody else in the audience have any comments or concerns with this?
Raised hands in the audience.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion to issue an amended order of conditions with the added condition that the plantings be completed by October 1st, 2020, and that they seek Conservation Administrator, a compliance review by the Conservation Administrator by October 31st, 2020.
So moved.
Tom made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Paul seconded. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
I do have one condition I'd like to throw in there, if I may. This is Ellie.
Right.
What can we put there in the meantime, to keep any runoff from going into the river?
There's a silt fence proposed on this plan. And that would be trenched in, typical silt fence.
Until all the plants are established?
My note indicated that the silt fence would remain in place until the ground has been planted with the specified vegetation, it is my expectation that Wilkinson is handling that work, and they would do what's necessary to prevent any erosion. That's a highly managed landscape approach. If you've ever worked with them, they're not leaving anything up to chance. I think, the silt fence could remain in place for some term afterwards, but I don't think it makes any sense to keep it there for a long, long time. There's going to be the shrubs that are going in there, and then there's some form of ground cover. I don't think it's going to remain bare soil.
I have a question, Ed.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Following along on Ellie's concern, Bob, in your experience, will that silt fence have hay bales?
It right now, I believe a trenched in silt fence would be enough. It's runoff, but it's not a river. You could back it up with a straw wattle if you staked it.
Yeah.
I don't think you need for straw bales, but a straw wattle makes sense.
Straw wattle, yeah, okay. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that we accept Ellie's concern about the runoff.
Okay, so I'm trying to think who made the motion again? I'm sorry.
I did.
Okay, so Tom, will you accept the additional motion or additional condition that a 8-inch straw wattle be added to the existing silt fence work limit line?
Absolutely.
All right, and who was it? Tom, David, who did the?
I second, I think.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Will you agree to that?
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Bishop,
Nay.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Nay.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-2.
All right, thank you. Next
Thank
order. Thank you, Bob. Next order of business, a request for certificate of compliance for SE 83-1227. This is for a series of properties on Great Island Road, but this is only seeking a partial certificate of compliance for 1069 Great Island Road only. So do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for SE 83-1227 for 1069 Great Island Road, Yarmouth, partial certificate of compliance only?
David, so moved.
It's been moved and seconded by
Rick, second.
Rick. All right, thank you. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Kelly, the next two are full certificates of compliance, and there are no issues with these, correct? They've all been taken care of now?
Sorry, yes, these are the ones being addressed by the new orders, so they are both
Okay.
okay to issue.
All right, so we can go ahead and issue certificate of compliance for SE 83-1552, 291 South Shore Drive, Yarmouth, and for SE 83-1555 for 327 South Shore Drive, Yarmouth. Is there a motion to that effect?
Ellie, so moved.
Thank you, Ellie. Is there a second?
David,
Second,
second.
Tom.
Okay, I heard David first. Beat you to it there, Tom. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Bishop,
Recuse.
oh, sorry. Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0 with one recused.
All right, thank you, everybody. Moving on to other business now. We have a violation for 4 Glenwood Street.
Call from Jess.
Who's calling me?
Popular guy.
All right, Kelly, you want to go ahead with 4 Glenwood violation?
Sure. So this was this came to me from Division of Natural Resources, where they got a call to a violation at Glenwood. Just trying to scroll through the slides. And there was vegetation being removed along the top of the coastal bank at that property. I'm showing on the slides at the moment the extent of the vegetation. You should be able to see along the top of the revetment, sort of leading right up to the house. And then the photos on the right-hand side show the area where the vegetation has been removed. And then also in the lower right photo is the area of vegetation removed, which is actually within the road layout on the edge of the water there. And I understand that the property owner is in attendance. I asked him to attend to discuss the violation with the commission, so you could decide what the next steps would be.
Kelly, up in the top right-hand corner of the house on the picture on the left, that area of green, isn't that also gone too? With the yellow line goes through?
Yes, the area beside the
Yeah.
septic system, yes, that has been cleared along the road as well, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. All right, is the homeowner available?
You can go ahead and speak. I'm not sure he's connected. It looks like his phone is trying to connect.
All right, well,
If you guys want to discuss it in the meantime and provide any direction as to what you'd like to see happen.
I would say that this needs a full enforcement order, and I would move to issue a fine as well. But that's
And
my opinion.
an enforcement order would include a restoration plan for the area?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I'm that's just my opinion. I'm offering my opinion first and letting the rest of the commission use that as a basis for discussion. If there's anybody.
I completely agree with you, Ed, on this one.
And we also have the details of the landscaper who carried out the work.
Oh, okay. So who was that?
Campbell Landscaping. So if you want to take enforcement action there too.
Yeah, I think we should issue a citation to them as well.
I concur.
So-
What level of citation are you looking at?
We have no previous enforcement activity with this property.
None that I am aware of. I couldn't see anything in the file. This is a new property owner as well.
Well, let's hear what the property owner has to say first, if he's there. Hello, sorry, there?
Nick? Maybe he's having some technical difficulties. Do you want to go ahead with action, or do you want to give him the opportunity to discuss it with you first?
Well, I mean, has he talked to you about this at all?
We've just spoken briefly over email. I only received it a couple of days ago.
All right, well, I have no problem. I mean, if you want to, it doesn't sound like he's connecting well at all. And I would like to give him his opportunity to discuss it, so.
So I could draft the enforcement order and put it on the agenda for the next meeting for you to vote and ratify. Does that sound reasonable?
That's exactly what I was going to offer. And at that time, he can hopefully get a better connection, and we'll be able to have a discussion with him then.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, so if that sounds good, it does not look like he's having any better luck connecting. So if that sounds good with the rest of the commission, any further discussion about that? We'll continue this. We'll actually have the administrator draw up the enforcement order, and then we will discuss this at the June 18th. Sorry. The June 18th Yarmouth Conservation Commission, and at which time hopefully the homeowner will be able to make a better presentation that way as well. That sounds good. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Ellie Lawrence, so
All
moved.
right. Ellie moved and Paul seconded. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. All right. Kelly, can we do the approval of the conservation restrictions for Starbuck Lane property? Is that something that we can do?
If,
Let me
sorry.
just ask you first, is this going to be a long thing? Because if not, I'm going to go ahead. If it is, I'm going to go ahead and relinquish my.
No, it should be quick unless anyone wants any major discussion on it. I'll just give you a quick overview that it's the Starbuck Lane 2 properties that we have recently purchased. And this is the conservation restriction, which goes on that property to restrict its use in the future for anything other than conservation purposes. And the restriction is held by the Conservation Trust, and the property is under the management of the Conservation Commission. So if anyone had any concerns or questions, otherwise we just need a vote to sign, and then just Ed, you need to sign it. I can bring it to you to sign.
Okay. All right. Any questions among the commissioners?
No, I just think that it's extremely important that this gets approved. There have been some purchases in the past, many years ago, that didn't have this control, and the end result was not always positive. So I really implore everyone to support this.
All right, sounds good. I think everybody's in agreement then. If so, may I have a motion to approve the conservation restriction for Starbuck Lane property?
So moved.
Ellie moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Rick seconded. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Must be on mute.
Durkin,
Tom, aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Hoops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
and Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, Kelly.
And then
Next
just the
order of business
minutes.
is the approval of the minutes of May 7th, 2020. Did anybody read them and would like to make any motion on them?
Yeah, I read them, and I do have one correction. Let me.
Which one's that, Ellie? Page 1?
Yeah, that's the one I have. The date?
Ellie, you went on mute.
On page 1, I think you have two different dates, April 26th and May 7th.
Great, thank you.
Okay, was that what
And
you
in
had,
the
Tom?
in the first paragraph, Kelly, the fourth line down, it mentions that you are moderating. It should be Kathy Williams moderating.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Ellie, you got something?
You're on
You're
mute, Ellie.
Unmute.
Still on mute.
Ellie, you're on
All right.
mute.
Okay, am I on now?
No, you're good.
Okay. On the third page on Anitas Neighborhood Association, it stated that I said that the homeowner added the extra float. I don't know if he did add the extra float. I only mentioned that he had a mooring and suggested that he may be able to use that.
Okay, I'll make that correction.
I don't know who added the extra float, but I know I didn't say the homeowner did. He just keeps his boat there.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, then could we get a motion to approve the minutes of May 7th, 2020 as amended?
So moved.
David moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Ellie seconded. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Pat, you're muted.
Aye, sorry.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, everybody. Kelly, any staff updates?
No staff updates.
I have one question.
All right,
if I
Tom?
may add.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was pleased, as I'm sure Pat was, to be reappointed to the Conservation Commission for another 3 years. The affirmative votes of the selection had one abstention. I wonder if Kelly knew whether that abstention reflected the candidates for reappointment or reflected a concern of the Conservation Commission.
I do not know. I'm sorry.
Who abstained?
Mr. Holcomb.
There's your answer there, Tom. It's not you, it's the commission.
Kelly, since I finish somebody's, do I have to be reappointed or am I good for the next 3 years?
What did your appointment letter? I think they gave you a 3-year term, didn't they?
Okay, I think they did
Yeah.
too, but to
Yeah.
be honest with you, I don't have.
Yeah, because it was so close to the end of that term that they just gave you another. Gave
Yeah.
you a complete 3-year term.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
See,
I'm
Tom,
stuck to 3 years. Okay.
Tom, I think that Norm only abstained because he's resigned and he doesn't really have standing any longer. After the meeting you and I had with him, how could he not support us, right?
That was my question, Rick. I don't know. I just thought Kelly might have had some insight.
Well, at least he voted, he only abstained. He voted no for me, so.
His term is done July 1st, so he's still voting. He's still a member.
He is. All right, any other staff updates, Kelly? Anything else from anybody else?
Kelly, I have a request. You sent that nice red for the wastewater. Is there a way we can get a hard copy of that sometime?
Hard copy of what? Sorry.
The wastewater runoff. I can't find mine, but somewhere here. I have it.
Stormwater.
Stormwater.
Yeah.
The first one they sent, I couldn't see any differences, and then they sent one with
the
red
red line
highlights.
copy. You want a hard copy of the red line?
If we're gonna have to revote it and talk about it, it would be helpful to
Okay.
see what there was and what there is.
Yep.
I don't know how other people feel, but helpful for me anyway.
Well, I can take one electronically, but it would help.
Yeah. So you do have it electronically already.
Oh, I
But-
do. Okay.
Yeah.
But I
With the
don't
red line,
know,
with the red line in it. Right.
yeah, but I don't know is how do I, if you could, someone teach me, how in the Zoom can I go to the electronic while we're talking about it and not miss the slides? Can I do both?
No.
No.
Well, you
Yeah.
can minimize, I guess.
Yeah,
if
you can
if
minimize your screen.
Yeah, but then I'd miss the slides, so,
No, you minimize it just to make it smaller.
okay,
Yeah, you can make it smaller. That way you don't miss anything.
okay.
No, that's what was happening with me with the minutes. I was getting all messed up with all that.
Yeah, that's
Does
why I'd like to
anybody-
have a hard copy.
Does anyone else want a hard copy of the redlined version of the regulations?
No, I printed one.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else from the commission?
Yeah, one question.
Yep, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah. Do we have any idea how long we're going to continue with this? Is there any news about when the meetings will be able to take place in person again?
I received an indication this week that after the 4th of July weekend, we would probably be able to resume in-person meetings.
Okay.
But we
That's
don't
not
have to.
that's not a definite, but that seems to be where we're heading.
Would that be inside or outside?
In the boat.
Mine isn't big enough for social distancing, but the
Oh.
parking lot is.
Are we
I'm
going to
assuming
keep the
it's-
same time or will we move back to the 6:30?
No.
That's an item for discussion for you guys.
All right, let's put that on the discussion for discussion for
next meeting.
next meeting then.
Okay.
I see nothing from anybody. So I say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Kelly, for your usual outstanding work. Thank you, Dawn Marie, for your outstanding work as well.
I
And
concur.
if not anybody, if nobody else has anything else, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I think Jeff Chisness is calling you again.
Is there a second?
Second, David.
All right, Kelly, roll call, please.
Bishop,
Aye.
Durkin,
Aye.
Bernstein,
Aye.
Lawrence,
Aye.
Oops,
Aye.
Huggins,
Aye.
Mulhern.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, the Yarmouth Conservation Commission for meeting for June 4th, 2020 is adjourned at 6:23 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Hey.
Thank
Aye.
you.
Kelly.